July 23rd, 1944, 1500 hours. Saint-Lô, Normandy, France. Headman Ernst Weber pressed his eye to the sight of his Panther tank, the world narrowing to the crosshairs before him. The summer heat shimmered over the fields, dust rising from the parched earth, and 200 meters ahead, a hedge wavered in the haze. Then movement. American Shermans. 4 of them, creeping through the mist of heat and tension. A thin smile tugged at Weber's lips. Mathematics favored him. His Panther's 75mm gun could pierce the frontal armor of a Sherman at a full 1,000 meters. The Americans would have to close to within 400 meters to even threaten him. The odds in armor and ballistics were on his side. Dear friends, if this video has reached you, it's not by chance. Right now, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Write a number from 1 to 5 in the comments. I will personally respond to the first 50 comments, and make sure to watch the video until the end. Target enemy tank 11 Horst, he said, voice calm, almost detached. Gunner Fitzer Klaus Hartmann aligned the crosshairs on the lead Sherman. Range, 600 meters. Fire. The Panther's gun thundered, a brief, violent roar. Through his optics, Weber watched the round strike the Sherman's glacis plate, a direct hit. Smoke billowed from its engine deck. 1 down, 3 to go. But something was off. The remaining Shermans didn't scatter. They didn't retreat into cover. Instead, they fanned out and surged forward, engines roaring, steel masses advancing, and behind them, more appeared, then more. 8, 12. Weber stopped counting, eyes narrowing. His gunner fired again. Another Sherman erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off like fireworks in a deadly show. Crews scrambled out, diving into nearby foxholes, yet the tide of green armor didn't pause. The radio crackled. Panther 32, enemy tanks approaching from your right flank. Count 6. No, 8. They're everywhere. Weber's loader slammed another round into the breach. The gunner fired. Another Sherman fell. But now the Americans returned fire. 75mm rounds pinged and clanged against the Panther's thick armor, most bouncing harmlessly off. Still, they came, relentless, emerging from every hedge, every ridge, every fold of the countryside. Panther 32, we're pulling back. Enemy strength too great. Disengage, came the voice of his platoon leader over the radio. In 3 minutes, Weber's Panther had destroyed 4 Shermans. Every engagement individually won. Yet as he reversed into cover, watching more American tanks pour onto the field like a relentless green tide, a grim realization settled over him. Every German tanker in Normandy was learning the same bitter truth. The Sherman wasn't built to beat German tanks head-on. It was built to make head-on battles meaningless. What Weber and thousands of his comrades discovered in the summer of 1944 would haunt them across France, through Belgium, and into Germany itself. The Sherman violated every principle of German armor doctrine. Undergunned, under-armored, mechanically simple. It was, by every standard a German engineer valued, inferior. And yet it was everywhere. The hatred German tankers felt toward the Sherman wasn't about its individual combat performance. It was about what it represented, a philosophy their doctrine could not contend with, a production model their industry could not match. The Americans built more tanks. More. And in the brutal arithmetic of industrial warfare, more always defeats better. Weber had not just faced a tank. He had faced an inexhaustible, pragmatic machine of war, one that would bury the Wehrmacht under sheer material weight. But this revelation didn't begin in Normandy. It began in North Africa, 18 months earlier. November 8, 1942, Operation Torch. American armor arrived on the Mediterranean shores, the 2nd Armored Division landing near Oran, Algeria, facing Vichy French forces equipped with tanks long obsolete. German observers from the Africa Corps, invited by their French collaborators to examine American equipment, inspected, captured Shermans with clinical interest. Their reports back to headquarters were confident, dismissive. Oberst Hans Fundluck, commanding a reconnaissance battalion in the Afrika Korps, summarized the prevailing German view. The American M4 tank represents typical American design philosophy, emphasis on mechanical reliability and ease of production over combat effectiveness. Imagine standing on the sands of Kasserine Pass, Tunisia, on February 14, 1943. The air is thick with the acrid smoke of burning armor, and before you stretches the chaotic tableau of war. The Afrika Korps had just unleashed a devastating counterattack against inexperienced American forces. Tigers and Panzer IVs of the 2nd Panzer Division tore through positions manned by the newly arrived U.S. 2nd Armored Division, leaving a trail of destroyed Shermans in their wake. German tank crews cheered their triumph, convinced their superior equipment had once again proven dominant. Yet, even as the battle raged and victory seemed assured, something unusual caught the eyes of German officers. Headman Heinrich von Stauffenberg, commanding a Tiger company, wrote home to his wife, "The Americans fight bravely, but they fight foolishly. They advance in straight lines, as if on a training ground. Their tanks ignite too easily. We call them Tommy Cookers, borrowing the British slang. One hit is usually catastrophic. In 2 days, my company destroyed 23 American tanks without suffering a single loss." But the after-action reports hinted at a growing unease. Unlike any enemy German crews had faced before, American tank crews rarely surrendered en masse. Time and again, destroyed Shermans were abandoned by their crews, only for the men to regroup with infantry and return to battle. Fresh tanks, often manned by the same crews who had lost vehicles that morning, arrived within hours, transported from depots far behind the lines. Radio intercepts revealed a new kind of coordination. Every Sherman could communicate, not just the command vehicles. The Germans, who equipped only select vehicles with transmitters, had no answer for this relentless networked assault. Perhaps most alarming was the American approach to material losses. German tankers were trained to value every Panzer at nearly any cost. A single Panzer IV could take weeks to produce and transport to Africa. Each loss was a catastrophe. But the Americans treated their tanks almost as disposable, replacing losses with relentless efficiency. The stark reality of industrial warfare was revealing itself, though German commanders were slow to grasp its implications. By May 1943, when the Afrika Korps finally surrendered in Tunisia, German intelligence had amassed a trove of data on the Sherman. The findings were clear. Technically, the Sherman was inferior. Its frontal armor, 76 mm at a 56 degrees angle, could be penetrated by German 75 mm and 88 mm guns at combat ranges. Its 75 mm M3 gun was adequate against infantry and soft targets, but powerless against the frontal armor of a Panther. In one-on-one duels, German tanks held undeniable superiority, yet production numbers painted a different story. By April 1943, American factories had delivered over 10,000 Shermans. Germany had produced roughly 5,000 tanks of all types. The report concluded that American numerical superiority could offset technical shortcomings. It was a conclusion that would prove catastrophically wrong. The Italian campaign in mid-1943 only reinforced this lesson. Sicily in July, then the Italian mainland in September, should have favored the defenders. Mountainous terrain should have allowed smaller German forces, wielding superior tanks, to hold against larger American formations. But time and again, German units were overwhelmed by waves of Shermans. Paul Becker, commanding a Panzer IV in the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, kept a diary that survives today. On October 7, 1943, near the Volturno River, he wrote, "We destroyed 3 Shermans at range. Victory felt hollow. For every Sherman we kill, 2 more appear. They advance like wolves, not lions. They do not seek glorious combat. They seek our destruction through attrition. Days later, Becker chronicled the human cost. October 12th. Lost Miller today. His Panzer IV destroyed 2 Shermans, but took 5 hits in return. He died winning the fight, but losing the war. By October 18th, the system's horrifying efficiency became clear. Tanks disabled in morning battles returned, repaired, and crewed by evening. The Americans maintained workshops, spare parts, and replacement crews immediately behind the lines, whereas the Germans waited weeks for replacements. It became obvious. The Sherman was not a tank designed for duels. It was a weapon of sustained presence, a mechanism to endure losses and maintain operational tempo, a system rather than a machine. The Normandy landings in June 1944 brought this reality into sharp relief. Allied forces had breached the Atlantic Wall, and German armor commanders braced for a battlefield of hedgerows and narrow lanes, the bocage, where every field became a fortress, every lane a killing ground. Panzer units expected to funnel Shermans into predictable kill zones, confident that German technical superiority would dominate. Initially, it seemed to work. The Panzer Lehr Division destroyed over 100 Shermans near Caen, achieving kill ratios of 5-1-1 or better. SS Obersturmführer Fritz Witt, commanding the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, reported, "American tanks are death traps. Our Panthers kill them at will. Morale among our tankers is excellent. They call it Sherman shooting. Easy prey." But beneath this tactical success lay a growing horror. German tankers were not merely fighting machines. They were struggling against a vast, relentless American system of production, logistics, and coordination. The Sherman was not the fragile adversary they had first assumed. It was an embodiment of industrial warfare, one that would define the battlefields of Europe in ways German doctrine had never anticipated. But within 2 weeks, the tenor of the campaign shifted dramatically. On July 7th, Witt was killed by naval gunfire. His successor, Kurt Meyer, inherited a division already bleeding slowly to death, not from superior American tactics, nor from better equipment, but from a problem German doctrine had no answer for: inexhaustible replacement. Meyer's war diary, preserved in the Bundesarchiv, captures the psychological shift sweeping through his ranks. On July 10th, he wrote, "We destroyed 18 Shermans today near Carpe. Tomorrow, there will be 18 more. We cannot sustain this. Every Panther we lose is irreplaceable. Every crewman dead is 2 years of training gone. They lose tanks? Yes, but their tanks return. Their crews survive in numbers that baffle us." The Sherman, German engineers had once dismissed as flawed, now revealed its hidden strengths. Its tall profile, once criticized as a glaring target, concealed a crucial advantage: crew comfort. German tankers, cramped in their narrow, oppressive vehicles, grew fatigued quickly, while the Sherman's 5-man crews moved freely, loaded ammunition efficiently, and operated effectively for hours on end without exhaustion. When a Sherman was hit, its crew could escape through multiple hatches. The Panther's 5-man crews struggled to exit their lower confined tank hulls. Tiger crews, packed even tighter, often suffered casualties caused by teammates obstructing escape routes. Even the Sherman's gasoline engine, long derided as a fire hazard compared to German diesel, proved less prone to ignition than the Germans' own fuel systems. Most Sherman fires were caused by ammunition stowage, a flaw American engineers would later remedy with wet stowage modifications by late 1944. But the darkest truth lay in survival rates. SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, Germany's most celebrated tank ace, with 138 confirmed kills, primarily on the Eastern Front, encountered Shermans near Villers Bocage on June 13, 1944. In 15 minutes, his Tiger obliterated roughly 14 British and American tanks, including several Shermans. It was a tactical triumph, a victory that electrified the German press. Yet Wittmann's after-action report revealed a chilling observation. The enemy crews escaped. Within an hour, many of those same men were climbing into replacement tanks from reserves and returning to battle. "We can kill their tanks all day," Wittmann noted. "They have more. We can destroy them all week. They train more crews. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is industrial attrition." Wittmann himself would fall 2 months later, on August 8, 1944, near Saint-Hippolyte. His Tiger was penetrated. Reports vary whether by a Sherman Firefly 17-pounder or an anti-tank gun. But the fact remained. Germany had lost an irreplaceable ace with decades of experience. The Allies? One crew among thousands, immediately replaced, continuing the fight in another Sherman. By late July 1944, during Operation Cobra, the American breakout from Normandy German tankers faced a nightmare made manifest. American armored divisions poured through breaches in numbers that rendered the technical superiority of individual German tanks irrelevant. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps, including the elite 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, attempted containment. They faced the U.S. First Army with over 1,000 Shermans. Obersturmbannführer Jan Pfiffer, commanding the 1st SS Panzer Regiment and one of Germany's most experienced armor officers, radioed his assessment on July 28th. "We are not fighting tanks. We are fighting a factory. We destroy 10 Shermans. 20 appear the next day. Our Panthers are superior in every technical measure, yet we have 40 Panthers against 400 Shermans. Mathematics defeats quality. We cannot win this." The numbers told a grim, inexorable story. From June 6th to August 21st, 1944, the Germans lost roughly 1,500 tanks and assault guns in Normandy. Panzer units ceased to exist as effective formations. Entire SS Panzer divisions were reduced to combat groups, a few dozen vehicles instead of full divisions. The Allies lost around 4,000 tanks in the same period, the majority Shermans, but those losses were replaced within weeks. By September, Allied armor in France exceeded pre-invasion strength, while German forces continued to decline. Replacement tanks never reached the front. Trained crews didn't exist. Fuel shortages curtailed both operations and training. Even the Sherman's mechanical reliability, once considered a weakness, became a weapon. German tankers mockingly dubbed them Ronsens, after the lighter brand, claiming they went up in flames easily. Yet behind the joke lay terror. A Sherman could drive 500 kilometers without major maintenance. A Panther's final drive failed after an average of 150 kilometers. Tigers required complete engine rebuilds after 500 kilometers. German tank units spent half their time on maintenance. Sherman crews spent just 10%. The rest? Fighting. German recovery vehicles could not tow Tigers alone. Disabled vehicles were often abandoned or destroyed by their crews to prevent capture. American recovery vehicles could tow any Sherman, allowing damaged tanks to return to battle within days. Shermans beyond repair were cannibalized for parts, keeping other vehicles running. German tankers watched this industrial efficiency with a mixture of horror and fascination. This was not just combat. This was war turned into mathematics, and the numbers always favored the Americans. Imagine, if you can, the autumn of 1944, the war grinding through France, Belgium, and Germany's western frontier. Hermann Bix, a Panther driver captured near Aachen in October, recounted to American interrogators a stark, almost existential truth. "We knew our tanks were better. Everyone knew it. A Panther could destroy 3 or 4 Shermans for every one lost. Simple arithmetic. But we couldn't kill them fast enough. And worse. Tomorrow, they would have more Shermans. We would have fewer Panthers. Each day we survived, we grew weaker. each day they fought, they grew stronger. This was the brutal calculus of industrial warfare, a lesson that would repeat itself again and again. Take the battles at Araort in September 1944. The U.S. 4th Armored Division, equipped largely with Shermans, destroyed more than 280 German tanks, most of them Panthers from the 5th Panzer Army's elite units. On paper, it looked like an American triumph of tactics or superior crew skill. The reality for German survivors was darker. Each engagement had been individually won. The German gunners had better optics, armor, and firepower, but the Americans fought differently. Shermans attacked from multiple directions, striking flanks and rear simultaneously. Destroy one, and two more would appear. They did not fight to display heroism. They fought to win. Oberst Heinrich Eberbach, captured after commanding Panzer Group Eberbach in Normandy, articulated it plainly to British interrogators. The Sherman is an excellent tank for American purposes. It isn't built to fight German tanks in isolation. It is built to overwhelm German tanks through sheer numbers, speed of replacement, and operational sustainability. We built tanks for war. They built tanks for mass production. In total war, they were right. We were wrong. The Ardennes offensive in December 1944, Hitler's last gamble, made this impossibly clear. Gruppe Piper, the armored spearhead, fielded Germany's best. King Tigers, with 80-ish mm guns, capable of destroying any Allied tank at 2,000 meters. Panthers, whose frontal armor was invulnerable to the Sherman's 75 mm, and veterans honed by years of combat. Opposing them were elements of the U.S. 7th and 9th Armored Divisions. Shermans crewed by men with mere months of experience. Initially, German tactical brilliance shone. Over the first 3 days, they destroyed more than 100 American tanks and pushed deep into enemy lines. Victory seemed within reach. Then, the inexorable force of American logistics intervened. Within a week, the U.S. Third Army redeployed 4 armored divisions, over 700 Shermans, across more than 100 miles of frozen, snow-laden terrain. They maintained relentless operational tempo, while German forces struggled to move because of fuel shortages. German tankers, in what must have felt like the ultimate humiliation, abandoned operational tanks because they could not be fueled. Piper's units left 70 Panther and Tiger tanks near Lutzel, fully functional yet immobile. Americans recovered these tanks, studied them, and sometimes used captured fuel to drive them to collection points. Meanwhile, American supply lines delivered 100,000 gallons of fuel daily to Sherman units, while maintenance crews repaired and returned damaged vehicles within 72 hours. Ralph Hehart, who escaped from Piper's encircled force, later reflected bitterly. "We destroyed their tanks by the dozen. It meant nothing. They had hundreds more. We captured supply dumps. They abandoned millions of gallons of fuel rather than let us take it. They could afford to burn what we would die to possess. That's when I knew we'd lost. Not a battle, not a campaign, but the very understanding of warfare itself." The march into Germany from January to May 1945 was the final education for German tank crews in industrial warfare. During the Ruhr Pocket, the last destruction of Army Group B in April, German armored units sat idle Panthers and Tigers fully operational, yet fuel-starved. While American Sherman divisions, fully supplied and maintained, rolled past unopposed. Some German crews fought on sheer willpower, achieving remarkable kill ratios even in defeat. But ratios meant nothing against overwhelming numbers. In March 1945, General Oberst Guderian, Inspector General of Panzer Troops, presented Hitler with production figures. Germany had manufactured approximately 5,000 tanks in 1944, its best year. America had produced around 17,000 Shermans alone, not counting other tanks. Hitler dismissed the numbers as defeatist propaganda. Guderian knew they were conservative. The stark truth German tankers discovered about the Sherman was not about its gun, armor, or engine. It was about the philosophy behind it. German tanks were masterpieces of engineering. Panthers, elegant and precise, the product of skilled craftsmen, exacting machining, and painstaking quality control. The Sherman was a pragmatist's creation. Adequate gun, adequate armor, adequate mobility, optimized for mass production, rapid crew training, easy maintenance, and logistical efficiency. In peacetime, German tanks would be admired and studied. In total war, they were buried beneath the relentless, overwhelming tide of American adequacy. British historian John Buckley would later calculate the stark arithmetic. Even if the Allies deployed tanks matching German technical specifications, they would have needed a 7.1 kill ratio to maintain parity against German production. Instead, by deploying adequate tanks in overwhelming numbers, they achieved roughly a 1.1 exchange rate, replacing losses 5 times faster than Germany could. The Sherman was not designed to fight fair, it was designed to make fairness irrelevant. Post-war interrogations confirmed the psychological toll. At Camp Clinton, Mississippi, in August 1945, American intelligence officers interviewed captured German tank commanders. General Major Fritz Berline, former commander of the Panzer Lehr Division, offered a bitter, haunting summation. Compare one German tank to one Sherman. We win. Compare one German tank division to one American armored division. You win. You didn't need better tanks. You needed more tanks, and they had them. We needed both better and more. We had only better. But better alone always loses against more. SS Standartenführer Kurt Meyer, former commander of the 12th SS Panzer Division, offered an even darker assessment. The Sherman taught us that we had prepared for the wrong war. We built tournament champions. You built production models. We forged swords. You manufactured bullets. Every measure we valued: technical sophistication, individual superiority, crew excellence. You rendered irrelevant through scale. The Sherman wasn't merely a tank, it was a philosophy of industrial warfare that we could not match. Perhaps most revealing were the voices of those who had actually fought in tanks rather than commanded from headquarters. Feldwebel Otto Karius, highly decorated with over 150 confirmed kills, reflected in his memoirs that German tankers' hatred of the Sherman was a hatred of the inevitable. We could destroy 10 Shermans before breakfast. By lunch, there would be 20 more. Every day we survived, we edged closer to defeat. Not because our tactics failed or our courage faltered. Mathematics doesn't care about courage. We couldn't kill them faster than they could replace them. That certainty, the inevitability of defeat despite daily victories, that was the darkness the Sherman brought. American tank crews largely remained unaware of the psychological storm they were unleashing. They knew German tanks were superior technically. Panthers outgunned and out-armored Shermans. They had seen friends die in burning tanks, yet they also knew replacement awaited them. Dead comrades were replaced by freshly trained crews. Destroyed tanks replaced by new Shermans rolling off assembly lines in Detroit. Technical Sergeant Lafayette P., one of America's most successful tank aces, pragmatically described the reality. Yes, their tanks were better one-on-one, so we didn't fight one-on-one. We had more tanks, more fuel, more ammunition, more of everything. They had to make every shot count. We could afford to miss. It wasn't a fair fight, but we weren't trying to fight fair. We were trying to win. This brutal pragmatism accepting casualties, losing battles to win wars, was alien to German military culture. German doctrine emphasized preserving forces, achieving decisive local victories, and operational art. The idea of tolerating catastrophic losses to maintain momentum was unthinkable. Yet American doctrine demanded it. Sherman crews were expendable. Individual tanks were expendable. Entire units could suffer tactical defeats, provided strategic momentum continued. This cold calculus, this willingness to sacrifice all in service of progress, shocked German tankers steeped in romantic notions of armored warfare. The lessons carried forward into the post-war Bundeswehr. When West Germany rebuilt its armed forces in the 1950s, Sherman experiences shaped doctrine and design. The Leopard 1, West Germany's main battle tank introduced in 1965, emphasized reliability, ease of production, and logistical sustainability over maximum technical performance. Officers who had faced Shermans designed doctrine assuming confrontation with numerically superior Soviet tank armies. The Bundeswehr's flexible response strategy explicitly acknowledged that technical superiority alone could not guarantee victory against overwhelming numbers. Soviet observers drew similar conclusions. While Soviet design had long emphasized quantity over individual quality, German encounters with Shermans validated the principle. The T-54 and T-55, produced in numbers exceeding 50,000, were the Soviet interpretation of American lessons. Adequate tanks, in overwhelming numbers, defeat superior tanks in limited quantity. The Sherman's true legacy was not its armor, its gun, or its combat record. Its legacy was proving that industrialized warfare required industrialized thinking. Wars between industrial nations would be won not by brilliance or technical perfection, but by logistics, production capacity, and systematic replacement of losses. German tankers learned this in blood, from Tunisia to the Ruhr, from Normandy to the Ardennes. Courage could not overcome industrial might. Excellence could not defeat adequacy deployed in relentless volume. Pride could not halt production lines. The darkness they faced was not merely death. It was the despair of inevitable defeat, despite perfect execution. Winning every engagement, yet losing the war. Destroying 5 enemy tanks, knowing 10 would appear tomorrow, while their own losses were permanent. It was the obsolescence of belonging to a military culture made irrelevant by the mathematical realities of industrial total war. Modern military analysis recognizes the Sherman as one of history's most successful weapon systems, not because of raw combat performance, but because it was seamlessly integrated into industrial warfare. Between 1942 and 1945, 49 324 Shermans were produced at roughly $53,000, each equivalent to $600,000 in today's dollars. The entire program, including development, production facilities, and support equipment, cost around $35 billion in modern terms. Germany, in comparison, produced roughly 45,000 tanks of all types during the entire war, from training vehicles to super heavy Tigers. Each Panther cost about 117,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $1,040,000, over twice a Sherman's cost. Tigers cost roughly 300,000 Reichsmarks. Beyond unit cost, Sherman design enabled rapid mass production using existing automotive infrastructure. Skilled craftsmen were not required. Assembly line workers could produce Shermans with brief training. German tanks required specialized facilities, hand-fitted components, and complex supply chains. Converting civilian industry to tank production was slow and difficult. Each tank demanded expert labor. Each repair required specialists. The Sherman could be maintained by a mechanic trained in automotive work. German tanks needed rare parts and expertise. The Sherman was not just a tank. It was an industrial concept, a weaponized philosophy, and the measure against which German armor ultimately found itself obsolete. The Sherman's reliability meant more time in combat and less time in the maintenance yard. German tanks, brilliant feats of engineering, were simultaneously undone by their own mechanical complexity. Every sophisticated system became a burden, consuming hours that could have been spent fighting. In every measure that mattered for industrial warfare, the Sherman was optimized. German tanks were not. The hatred German tankers felt toward the Sherman was, at its core, the hatred of a warrior culture confronting industrial reality. They had been raised to revere individual excellence, tactical brilliance, and technical superiority. The Sherman embodied the opposite: systematic adequacy, mass replacement, and cold mathematical inevitability. They were not defeated by superior soldiers or better tactics. They were defeated by production lines, supply chains, and logistics networks. The Sherman was merely the physical manifestation of American industrial capacity. Every tank destroyed was replaced. Every crew killed returned to the field. Every tactical victory was absorbed by a system that treated losses as a cost of doing business. This was the dark truth of why German tankers hated the Sherman. Not because it killed them, though it did. Not because it sometimes outfought them, though it did, but because it represented the end of warfare as they understood it. The Sherman proved that in industrial total war, the riveter on the assembly line mattered as much as the tank ace in the field. The logistics officer routing spare parts was as crucial as the panzer general plotting maneuvers. The production manager optimizing assembly lines was as decisive as a field marshal commanding armies. German tankers had trained for nightly duels of armored warriors. Instead, they faced industrial attrition, where their skill and courage were systematically neutralized by American adequacy, deployed in overwhelming numbers. That was the darkness, not the fear of dying, but the certainty of losing despite doing everything correctly. The knowledge that victories were meaningless, skills irrelevant, courage futile, against an enemy who did not need to fight fair because they could simply outproduce you. When the last German tank commander surrendered in May 1945, he did so knowing that German crews had won thousands of tactical engagements against Shermans, yet had lost the war completely. The Sherman had proven a fundamental principle. In modern warfare, good enough in vast quantities defeats perfect in limited numbers, every time, without exception, forever. That lesson was written in the wreckage of thousands of tanks across North Africa, Normandy, the Ardennes, and the Ruhr Valley, paid for in the lives of tens of thousands of tank crews, German and American alike. The Germans hated the Sherman not because it was an exceptional tank, but because it was good enough deployed in numbers that rendered German technical excellence irrelevant. They hated it because it represented industrial power that Germany could not match, could not counter, and could not survive. In the end, German tankers learned what every military force since has learned. In industrialized warfare, the side with more factories wins. The Sherman was never designed to be the best tank. It was designed to be the tank that won the war. And it did. The dark truth is simple. German tankers did not hate the Sherman because it beat them in combat. They hated it because it rendered combat itself irrelevant through the sheer weight of industrial might. They had prepared for battle. Instead, they were buried under an avalanche of production. That hatred, forged in the flames of burning tanks from Tunisia to Berlin, stands as a testimony to the Sherman's true purpose: not to fight fair, not to win duels, not to defeat German tanks, but to make fairness, duels, and German tank doctrine obsolete. The Sherman succeeded completely, and German tankers hated every moment of their systematic, inevitable, mathematically certain defeat at the hands of a tank that was merely adequate, but produced in impossible numbers. That was the darkness, and it never lifted until the last shot was fired, and the last German tank fell silent in May 1945, overwhelmed, not by superiority, but by unstoppable industrial volume.